All right, so all of you have, so many of you have been coaches of your kids growing up in a sport. I'm really curious because this always cracks me up. How many of you coached your kid in a sport that you yourself had never played or participated in previous before coaching? Okay, that's all right. The handful of you, all right, good. And isn't that fun to try to learn on the fly? What is this? And the kids tend to know more than you do, and that's always an interesting thing. But you're the authority figure, so they listen to you anyways. So today we're going to talk about coaching. Now, here's an interesting thing. Those of you that do like sports, you know this. I'm going to say this. This is not going to be a surprise to you. But a coach can either elevate or limit a team by the way he coaches. For example, if you've got 4th and 3 and you've got the best running back in the NFL and you go Wildcat. Just an idea, just something like that if you know what we're talking about. So a coach can either elevate his team, right? Like you can take a mediocre team with great coaching, make a cohesive team, and it can be unbelievable. It can be off the charts. You can also, with coaching, take a team that's filled with superstars and a coach that doesn't know what he's doing, and he limits the ability of the team because of the way that he does it. So coaches, even in professional sports, are not just kind of cast-off things. They're actually very, very necessary. And the same thing is true for you as a parent. It doesn't matter how old your child is, you're still their coach. And so today we're going to talk about how to coach up your child. And every good coach knows that there are at least 3 tools that you need in your toolbox to be able to be an excellent coach. So if you're a coach right now, let me just give you 3 things. They're really simple. It's discipline, correction, and training. Those 3 things, 3 words. We're going to give you a definition of those 3 words, okay? Their discipline is equal parts reward and punishment. So that's discipline. Now, people think discipline, and they think, oh, right, it's the spanking of the backside, it's the slapping of the hands, it's the soap in the mouth. That is part of it, but that's the punishment side of it. Discipline also has the reward side, because what you want to do is you want to create the pathway for them so that they want to do the right thing, which gives them the reward, and they don't want to do the bad thing, which gives them the punishment. So that's discipline, right? It's equal parts punishment and reward. That's part of that. The second one is correction. Now, correction, often when you think of correction, people think it's like, no, don't do that, right? And that's the correction. But that's not really correction. That's just hollering at your kid. Correction is actually redirecting them to the right way or the proper way of doing it. So you go, no, that's not how you do it. Here's how you do it. And you show them over and over and over and over and over again. I remember when I was coaching soccer, I did it for our girls as well. I actually did play. But trying to teach a group of 4th graders how to lock their knee when they strike a soccer ball, wow, that is an interesting process. And you do it over and over, and sometimes you get kicked in the face with a soccer ball. Sometimes they miss the ball completely and they fall on their butts and they start crying, and then you got to stop practice because, so-and-so is crying. It's all these different things. And that's what correcting is. It's constantly redirecting. No, that's not the right way. Here's how you do it. If you've got a 2-year-old, it looks more like this. They're running in this direction towards the animal that they're about ready to pull the tail. You grab them by the shoulders, you pick them up, their feet are still running, you put them in this direction, and they keep running that way. That's correction, right? That's redirection. So then the last one is training. Now, training promotes skill development and muscle memory. So the idea of training is, you ever heard the idea of practice makes perfect? Have you heard that before? That's not true. Because if you're practicing wrong, then you're actually practicing incorrectly, and then when you get to the game, guess what you're going to do? You're going to do it incorrectly. And so the real way to say that is perfect practice makes perfect. And that's the idea of training. You're making sure that they do it the right way over and over and over and over and over again to where they don't even think about it. So these are the 3 tools that every great coach has. And it doesn't matter on what level you're on, these are tools that you need to use to be able to coach whoever the people are that you're coaching, whether you're a leader somewhere, whether you're a mom or dad, whether you're a mentor, whether you're a supervisor, whether you're just working at a job but you've got other people around you and maybe they look to you for some answers or some questions. These are the 3 things that you need in your tool bag to really be able to be a great coach. And so we're going to talk through those three things and how they actually connect to our life as a parenting coach. And God has said that those three things are important too. We're going to look at three proverbs, or three tweets that we've been calling them that way in the Bible that refer to that. So we're going to look at this. Proverbs chapter 19, verse 18. It says, "Discipline your children while they are young enough to learn. If you don't, you're helping them destroy themselves." So literally what the Proverbs says is, listen, this is really important. When they're young enough to still actually experience the rewards or the consequences of their actions, and you can build that into them, what you're doing is you're helping them later on avoid really big issues, because they already know that's not the right path to go down, because you've been taking your time disciplining them up to this point in time. Proverbs 29, verse 17. "Correct your son, and he will give you comfort. He will also delight your soul." So if you take time to correct, which is the redirecting and showing them how to do it, so this is the right way, then when your child is older, you can actually sit back and go, I'm enjoying watching this, instead of, oh my word, I can't believe they just posted that. What are they thinking? It's kind of a different response, right? You get that joy. And the last one is Proverbs 22:6. "Train up a child in the way that he should go, and even when he is old, he will not depart from it." Now, we're going to come back to this verse at the end when we kind of refresh this idea of training, because a lot of people have used this verse and they've used it incorrectly. They've used it this way. If you teach a kid about the Bible, I'm off center here really bad. I was wondering why I felt goofy. Okay, but I don't have ADD or anything like that. So, when you're doing this, like this, the idea was, if you teach your kid all these Bible verses and memorize all these things, then they'll never make a mistake. Now, here's the thing. If you even say that, you know that you're in trouble. If you say, listen, like your kid is 18 months old, if you have a child that's 18 months old, that's your first child, you think that child's perfect. Like, you're like, oh, look at my baby. You're like, just wait. All of us parents who have older kids are like, just wait. There's going to be one day when they're going to look at you and they're going to go, I don't like you, or I hate you, or they're going to pitch a fit in the middle of Walmart, or worse yet, they'll pitch a fit in the middle of Target, and you'll have a bunch of 60-year-old women looking at you going, if you do this, right? And it just helps so much. So that's really, when you think about it, that verse doesn't have to do with that. It's talking about training. Remember, we talked about training. It's that muscle memory. It's that teaching them how to do it the right way and the right process, so that it becomes second nature to them, and there's a way to do that. So this is our big idea for today. Discipline, correction, and training unlocks your child's potential. You see, that's the key of a coach, isn't it? It's to come alongside someone who needs to be coached up to the next level, who needs to get better at something that they already are, and it needs to improve and really squeeze every drop of potential out of it. And you, as mom and dads, your responsibility is to be able to coach up your kids and help them unlock every amount of potential. Now, I want to pause for just a moment, because I know some of your stories. I know some of the things that you guys have gone through, and I know some of you are sitting there going, I didn't have a parent that did that. And sometimes when we go through things like this and you think, your initial thought is, if you have kids, you're like, okay, I'm not going to do that with my kids, and that's a good thing, that's a positive thing. But then there's this thought process that goes, I'll never unlock my potential because my parent didn't do X, Y, and Z. In fact, it's super popular to blame mom and dad for everything, right? Well, here's the thing that we just have to be honest with ourselves about. Your parents may have messed you up. Let's just be honest about it, right? Listen, if you're still in your parents' house, don't look at them or do anything like that right now, because you'll just pay for it later. But your parents may have messed you up. But now you have the unbelievable ability to be anything that God has called you to be. You are not limited by your parents. You're not limited by your circumstance. You're not limited by the people around you. If God has called you to do something, there are no limitations on your life other than the ones that you put on your life. So if you run around always blaming mom and dad, you will always be limited by what mom and dad did or did not do. However, if you own up and you take responsibility for who you are, then in Christ you can be anything that God's called you to be. So that's just a side note, but I think that's important because sometimes, especially as we're moms and dads and we're in that role now, right, we tend to think, we tend to believe, we tend to own up, and we say, hey, this is my responsibility. But man, if my parents would have, I would be so much better off. Well, here's the deal. God never wastes hurt. God never wastes a problem. God never wastes a pain in your life. And so I highly encourage you to just kind of let that go, because the Bible says that God uses discipline, correction, and training to unlock your child's potential, and you have that opportunity. So as parents, we have a natural desire to protect our kids. There's just that natural desire, right? We want to protect them from things. We want to keep them safe. We don't want to let them do things. I've known parents that didn't let their kids play off of concrete because it's like, oh, there's dirt danger. And I'm like, all right, well, guess what? They're going to have more than dirt danger. Their fingers been up their nose in other places. So that's just the reality of the way that kids are. And so there's this natural desire to protect our kids. But here's the problem. If all we ever do is protect our kids, and we never prepare our kids, then we'll never be able to help them unlock their potential. Because what happens is when they step out in the real world, they're going to get smacked in the face, and mom and dad, you're not going to be able to be there to protect them. And they're not going to know what to do. They're going to take that one smack in the face and they're going to fold. They're going to fall apart. They're going to blame everybody. They're going to think the world is against them. And what all it is it's just a setback. It's just something that they had to deal with. So as moms and dads, if we overprotect, then we are under-preparing. And we are therefore muting their potential to become all that God has called them to be. But as a parent, our job is to come alongside our child and to coach them up. Here, for those of you that are football fans, here's kind of the analogy I like to use, okay? So when they're young, like elementary age, that's training camp, right? You know there's going to be lots of mistakes. You know they're probably, they're trying to figure out just how to just do the right thing. They're trying to walk, and that's training camp, right? Lots of mistakes. Their adolescent years is like the preseason. You keep score, but it really doesn't count. Right? You're just trying to get them out. And then finally, as they graduate and they go into adulthood and young adulthood, it's like, okay, this is real life. So if you think about it that way, you realize you've got a certain amount of time to really get them prepared for real life. Because whether you like it or not, it's coming. And it's coming faster than you think it is. And so you got to take that time to be able to do it. When you're in your home, when they're in your home, your job is to coach them up and to use these 3 tools to prepare them for that. Because quite literally, the best way to say it, and I hate this, whenever anyone says this, I chuckle, but you are your child's life coach, okay? You're your child's life coach. You're the person that they're looking to for how do I do this? How do I manage this? How do I work through life? And so your role is to actually prepare them. So we're going to dig into each one of these things. The first one is discipline. Discipline teaches them responsibility. It's responsibility for the consequences of their actions. That's what discipline does. Now, consequences are one of those things that we tend to think it's a negative thing. We say, oh, consequences, that's a bad thing. The truth is consequences are neutral. Consequences are just a response. There's something that happens because of something else that has happened. And so as parents, we don't want our kids to get in trouble, usually. We really don't want to have to get on our kids. We don't want to have to do those things. So we tend to follow behind them, picking up their toys. There's always one in a marriage, usually, right? If you're married, it's like the one that's like, pick up those toys. Another one that goes, I'm just going to pick that up for them, so put those away. And then in the little bit older, it becomes like their homework. They got their homework wrong, and you're the one that goes by with the eraser and erases it and puts the right answer in. You try to mimic their too, but it's impossible to actually do that. And then it's the dishes as they get older. Like, oh, who's that? The dishes in the sink. You're like, listen, I'm just going to clean them and be over. And you don't want your kids to kind of have to deal with that. But here's the problem. You're protecting them from the consequences of their actions. And consequences, like I said, they can be either positive or neutral or negative. But here's the thing. Consequences are actually a law of life. Did you know that? Newton, in his third law of motion, writes these words: for every action in nature, there is an equal and an opposite reaction. That's consequence. So for every action in nature, Newton's talking about his laws of motion. Yes, he wrote the laws of thermodynamics, but these are laws of motion. And he says, listen, for every action, in nature, there is an equal and an opposite reaction. That's consequence. It can be a positive, a neutral, or a negative. And what happens is that when we actually discipline our kids, we're teaching them that every behavior they manifest, every attitude they exhibit, every word that they speak, and for that matter, everything that they put out into the world has a consequence. You see, unfortunately, we tend to, in our society, not want to deal with consequences. We want to be able to do whatever we want and pretend that there aren't any consequences. But the reality is, for everything we do, every word that we say, every attitude that we exhibit, every action that we manifest, there is always a consequence. Galatians chapter 6, verse 5, and then verses 7 through 9 says this, "For we are each responsible for our own conduct." In fact, really quickly, I think that's important. Let's read that together, okay? Just out loud with a little bit of gusto. Here's the verse says, "For we are each responsible for our conduct." We're each responsible. When you do something, it's not anybody else's fault but yours. We are each responsible for our own conduct. He goes on in verse 7, "Don't be misled. You cannot mock the justice of God. You will always harvest what you plant." Now, those of you that love the little gardens and that type of thing, you've got the gardens in your house, or you've got the gardens in your backyard, and it's a little plot and all that cool stuff. Those of you that love to do that, someone brought some tomatoes in, and we loved those this last week. It was fantastic. But here's the thing. How shocked would you be if you planted a tomato seed and a tomato came up? How shocked? Would you be, on a level of 1 to 10, would you be shocked? Well, maybe you would be, because you're like, I have no green thumbs whatsoever. Everything dies in my house. But if you were to plant a little teeny tiny tomato seed and a tomato plant actually grew, how many of you would actually be shocked? A couple of you, because you kill everything. Okay, right. But here's the thing, right? If you planted a tomato seed, what do you expect to come up? A tomato plant. Now, if you planted peas, which, by the way, I don't know how anyone would ever want to plant peas, but if you planted a pea and a melon came up, on a scale of 1 to 10, how shocked would you be? Right? See, that's the thing. Why? Because whatever you put in comes out. And that is the bottom line of why discipline is necessary. He goes on, listen, those who live only to satisfy their own sinful nature will harvest decay and death from that sinful nature. If all you ever do is to please yourself, to do the things you want, I want it my way, this way, no way, blah, 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 then guess what? Consequences are coming your way that are going to be negative. But those who live to please the Spirit will harvest everlasting life from the Spirit. So let's not get tired of doing what is good. And at just the right time, we will reap a harvest of blessing if we don't give up. One more thought before we move to the next thing. If you plant that tomato seed, are you going to have a tomato tomorrow morning? It doesn't happen that way. It'd be nice, wouldn't it? I'd like a tomato sandwich tomorrow. Plant, there we go. Tomorrow morning, it's there. It doesn't work that way. It takes time. And the same thing is true for consequences. Sometimes consequences are immediate. And in fact, when your child is young and you're learning to discipline them, consequences should be immediate so that they learn faster. But as you get older, consequences tend to take a little bit longer to develop. And sometimes you have no idea why something bad is happening in your life, when in reality, it's not just something bad that's happening in your life. It's a consequence of something you did weeks, months, years earlier. Okay? So, discipline your children so that they'll take responsibility for the consequences of their action. Number 2, correct them. Correction reinforces the right way to live and follow God. Correction reinforces the right way to live and to follow God. Now, this is super important. Correction is not doing it for them. Correction is not doing it for them. It's teaching them and showing them how to do it. There's an old school way of, it says how to teach somebody how to do it. I'm just going to walk through with you. It's just 4 simple steps. The first step is you sit and watch me do it. You sit, watch me do it. Then the next step is, okay, now the two of us, we're going to do it together. We're going to do it together. And then the next step is, now listen, you're going to do it, and I'm going to watch you. And that's where that correction comes in. It goes, I'm going to recorrect, redirect. And then the last part is you do it all by yourself. It's a simple 4-step process of teaching your children how to do it. In fact, here's the thing. You've probably already done this. If you've taught your child how to ride a bike, if you've taught your child how to tie their shoes, if you've taught your child how to write their name, if you've taught your child how to do their ABCs, how to sing a song, you've done it already because they watch you doing it and then they go, I'd like to do that. And then you go, well, let me show you how to do it. Okay, here's what you do. You take your shoelace and you tie a knot and then you go like this. You go over in the rabbit hole and all the different things. I don't remember what they are. And you do that. And over and over again, what happens is that they begin to be able to do it without you and they do it okay. This is where the idea of training and muscle memory comes in because they do this. And when we understand that, we know that this works with these physical, emotional, different things and how it's supposed to work. You consistently correct and redirect your children. And God says that those who consistently do the right thing, those who continually follow His truth and obey His commands will flourish, no matter what the circumstance is. No matter what the issue is, no matter what's going on, no matter what mom and dad did, no matter what your spouse does, no matter what your kids are doing, no matter what your boss does, the Bible says if you consistently do those things, you'll flourish. King David poetically puts it this way in Psalm 1, verses 1 through 3. Oh, the joys of those who do not follow the advice of the wicked, or stand around with sinners, or join in with the mockers, but they delight in the law of the Lord, meditating on it day and night. By the way, pause really quickly because sometimes, especially if you're new to Scripture and you hear the word meditating, you're thinking, I've got to cross my legs and go, oh. That's not what it means. Meditating simply means allowing the thought to kind of hang around in your brain for a longer period of time. It allows you to kind of process it. Now, what does it mean by that? Interesting. That's a good thought. Okay, well, how does that figure out? That's what it means to meditate. So when you learn a new truth, you allow it to kind of saturate in your mind for a little bit. You meditate on it. You think about it. You figure out how that impacts you and how it does it. And then he goes on. He goes meditating on it day and night. And then here's the thing. They're like trees planted along the riverbank, bearing fruit in each and every season. And their leaves never wither, and they will prosper in all that they do. David says, listen, here's the thing. If you constantly and consistently focus on doing the right thing, if you've had a mom and dad that taught you in this area of correction and learning how to do it and redirecting them to do the right thing, and they've gone through that process and they showed you how to do it, then the reality is that no matter what the circumstances around you may be, no matter if the soil is terrible, no matter if the people around you are terrible, you will still flourish because you have the promise of God on your life as you do the right thing and follow Him. So, we've got the idea of what it means to discipline, the idea of what it means to correct, and then finally our last one is this, training. Training develops skills that allow them to be successful later in life. Training develops skills that allow them to be successful later in life. The idea of training is not necessarily for this moment. The idea of training is regular season is coming. It's not too far away. And you want to get them ready when everything is running around like crazy, when it gets real, when life slaps them in the face. Training is really what it all boils down to. And that's how it's going to work. Training your child to ride a bike, to write their name, all these different things, it's just something that sticks with them. We talked about that with correcting, right? Now, here's the thing. I know you're going to be surprised by this, I'm sure. It's been probably over a decade since I rode a bike last. No one's shocked by that? Okay. It's probably a decade or more since I rode a bike last. But do you know what? If I walked out to my garage today and I pumped the air into my tires and I jumped on that thing, I would have no issues. I'd be picking it right up with no questions, no issues whatsoever. I wouldn't fall over. I wouldn't be like, man, I need training wheels again. No, because it's something that I did so much when I was younger, and how my dad taught me and let go of the bike, and my mom was freaking out, but I made it and I did it and I learned how to do it. It is a skill that I will never forget. Here's crazy. Every time I wake up in the morning and I get my shower and I get my clothes and I put my shoes on, I never have to go, now, is it the rabbit around the hole? Is it through the hole? When I tie my shoes, I just do it. It is not a big deal. Why? Because it's something that I learned a long time ago, and that I had repetition over and over and over and over and over again. And no matter what happens, I can always go back to that. So the benefit of training your child in these physical things, these mental things, these emotional things is obvious. We know that, right? We don't want to have a 22-year-old that doesn't know how to tie his shoes. That's not a good thing. Or how to write their name. We know these things are good. But the idea of training in the spiritual world, in these spiritual things, is equally important. In the same way, we need to train our kids how to read their Bible, how to talk with God, how to worship freely, how to live right, how to serve God as they serve others, how to make Christ the priority in their life, how to treat people with kindness and grace, the way that Christ taught and treated people with kindness and grace. And we look at those things, and here's what we do. We do it one time, and for some reason we think they've got it, and we move on. But training is repetition. Over and over and over and over and over and over and over again. That's training. And we spend so much time with the stuff that really doesn't matter much in training, and so little time in the stuff that matters immensely when the real world hits in. So here's the thing. If you really want your children to be successful in life, you have to discipline, you have to correct. This idea of training, I feel like that's where we tend to struggle, because it's hard. And it gets boring sometimes as a parent, does it not? Like, listen, I told you last week about that. Yeah, but I don't remember how. And you sit down and you teach them again and again and again and again. But the benefits of being trained in spiritual things are unbelievable. And I'm going to read something. I'm going to read an entire chapter of the Bible. It's not that long. But I'm going to read it's Psalm 112. And I just want you to listen. In fact, if you want to read along, if you want to follow along, you can. If you just want to close your eyes and listen, you can do that too. But I want to read to you the benefits that God gives those that are trained spiritually. And this is where, by the way, that Proverbs 22:6 comes in. Train your children in things that are right, and when they're old, they will not depart from it. Here's what it means. It means if you train your child in those ways as they grow up, and when they mess up, because they will mess up, they will always be able to come back to this. It doesn't guarantee that they'll always come back to it, but it says they'll always have it. They'll always remember that. They'll always have that training. They'll always have that skill set. They'll always have that spiritual muscle memory to come back to where they know they need to be. And the benefits are this. Praise the Lord. How joyful are those who fear the Lord and delight in obeying His commands. Their children will be successful everywhere. An entire generation of godly people will be blessed. They themselves will be wealthy, and their good deeds will last forever. Light shines in the darkness for the godly. They are generous, compassionate, and righteous. Good comes to those who lend money generously and conduct their business fairly. Such people will not be overcome by evil. Those who are righteous will be long remembered. They do not fear bad news. They confidently trust the Lord to care for them. They are confident and fearless and can face their foes triumphantly. They share freely and give generously to those in need. Their good deeds will be remembered forever. They will have influence and honor. The wicked will see this and be infuriated. They will grind their teeth in anger. They will slink away because their hopes are thwarted. Now, as we read through that, God is saying, listen, here's the deal. If you do these things, these are the benefits. And let me kind of regurgitate the benefits, okay? But do it in a way that maybe we can just kind of follow in just in a list fashion. You'll be filled with joy. You have success everywhere you go. Wealth, clear-sightedness, a generous, compassionate, and righteous heart, no fear of bad news, confidence in the Lord's provision for your life, ability to overcome evil, a winner's mentality, and influence and honor. Is there a better list that you could write that you would want for your kids than that? And God says, if you train your children in this way, those are the benefits of a person whose life was trained to follow God. If you want what's best for your children, then you'll do whatever is necessary to coach them up with discipline, correction, and training so that they can experience what it means to be a man and a woman who are used by God, who could become all that God has called them to be. Because when you use discipline, correction, and training, it unlocks your child's potential. So turn them loose. Father, we thank you.